It was a warm and sunny Saturday afternoon in Greenfield Park. The sky was a bright shade of blue, dotted with only a few fluffy white clouds that drifted lazily across the horizon. Families had gathered under shady trees, spreading out picnic blankets and unpacking baskets filled with sandwiches, fruits, and cold drinks. Children laughed as they chased each other around or played tag near the playground. Joggers moved along the winding paths, their sneakers crunching softly against the gravel. It was one of those perfect days where everything seemed peaceful and carefree. Among the crowd there was Marcus Johnson, a quiet 15-year-old boy who preferred spending his time alone rather than being part of large groups. He wasn't like most teenagers his age who loved loud music, sports, or hanging out at malls. Instead, Marcus found joy in simpler things that many people might overlook. His favorite activity was sketching. He carried a worn-out sketch pad wherever he went, capturing scenes from everyday life, an old oak tree standing tall in the park, a mother reading to her child on a bench, or even stray cats napping in patches of sunlight. For Marcus, these moments were treasures worth preserving. That afternoon, Marcus had chosen his usual spot, a cozy area beneath a sprawling oak tree near the edge of the park. The tree offered just enough shade to keep him cool while still letting some golden sunlight filter through its leaves. He sat cross-legged on the ground, leaning back slightly against the rough bark of the trunk. His sketch pad rested on his lap, and a set of colored pencils lay neatly beside him. Today, he wanted to draw the view in front of him, the gentle curve of the path leading toward the basketball court, framed by rows of dandelions swaying gently in the breeze. As he sketched, Marcus felt completely absorbed in his work. Time seemed to slip away as he focused on every detail, adding soft shading here and sharp lines there. He didn't notice the growing commotion not too far away. Near the basketball court, a group of older teens had gathered. They were loud and rowdy, their voices carrying easily over the otherwise calm atmosphere of the park. Their laughter was sharp and mocking, cutting through the air like knives. Some kids nearby shot nervous glances in their direction but quickly looked away, pretending not to notice. The leader of the group was Brad, a tall and lanky teenager with unkempt hair and a permanent scowl etched onto his face. His friends, Chris, Ryan, and Jake, followed him closely, eager to impress him with their antics. They weren't particularly popular at school, but they made up for it by acting tough whenever they could. To them, picking on others was a way to feel powerful, to prove that they mattered. On this particular day, they had already harassed two younger kids who were playing frisbee, making fun of their clothes and throwing the frisbee so hard that it landed in a bush. When the kids ran off crying, the gang high-fived each other, congratulating themselves on yet another successful prank. But their attention soon shifted elsewhere. As they scanned the park for their next target, Brad's eyes landed on Marcus sitting quietly under the oak tree. At first glance, Marcus didn't seem like someone special, just another kid enjoying the outdoors. But to Brad, his solitude made him stand out. There was something about how Marcus kept to himself, completely unaware of the world around him, that sparked Brad's curiosity and cruelty. "Hey, check it out," Brad said, nudging Chris with his elbow. "What's that loser doing over there?" Chris squinted, trying to see what Brad was pointing at. "Looks like he's drawing or something. Who does that anymore? That's so lame." Ryan snickered. "Probably some weirdo artist type. Bet he thinks he's all deep and mysterious." Jake chimed in, grinning mischievously. "Let's go mess with him. See if he's got any talent or if he's just wasting his time." Brad smirked, clearly liking the idea. "Yeah, let's teach this kid a lesson. Maybe he'll learn not to sit around looking so pathetic." With that, the four of them started walking toward Marcus, their steps slow and deliberate. They weren't in a hurry. They wanted to savor the anticipation, the thrill of knowing they held all the power. None of them noticed the tension building in the air, the way parents glanced nervously in their direction, or how children instinctively moved farther away. All they cared about was finding entertainment, and if it came at someone else's expense, so be it. Meanwhile, Marcus remained blissfully unaware of the approaching danger. He was lost in his own little world, carefully shading the outline of a dandelion on his sketchpad. Each stroke of his pencil brought the picture closer to life, and he couldn't help but smile faintly at the progress he was making. For once, nothing else mattered. Not the noise of the park, not the distant hum of traffic, and certainly not the possibility that trouble might be heading his way. If only he had turned his head for a moment, he might have seen the menacing figures closing in. But he didn't, and by the time he realized what was happening, it would already be too late. Marcus didn't notice the gang until they were almost upon him. The first sign that something was wrong came when Chris, the tallest of the group, stepped behind him and gave him a hard shove. Marcus stumbled forward, startled, his sketchpad slipping from his hands and landing face down on the grass, his colored pencils scattered in every direction, rolling away like runaway marbles. "What's this?" Chris sneered, picking up the sketchpad before Marcus could grab it. He flipped through the pages carelessly, his lips curling into a mocking grin. "Look at this garbage. Trees? Flowers? Seriously? What are you, 5 years old?" The others laughed loudly, their voices sharp and cruel. Ryan bent down to pick up one of the pencils, twirling it between his fingers as if inspecting it. Man, who even uses pencils anymore? This guy's living in the Stone Age. He tossed the pencil aside, letting it clatter onto the ground. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. His heart pounded as he tried to stand up, but Jake shoved him back down before he could fully rise. "Stay down, loser," Jake said with a smirk. "We're just trying to help you out. You shouldn't waste your time on stupid stuff like this." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, though he fought to hold them back. He reached out for his sketchpad, his voice trembling. "Please, give it back. That's mine." "Aw, what's wrong?" Brad taunted, stepping closer. He grabbed the sketchpad from Chris and held it high above his head, well out of Marcus's reach. "Did we hurt your feelings, poor baby? Maybe you should go cry to your mommy." The gang erupted into laughter again, their jeers echoing across the park. A few people nearby glanced over, curious about the commotion, but most quickly turned away. Some pretended not to see anything at all, while others exchanged uneasy looks. No one dared to step in. After all, Brad and his friends had a reputation for being troublemakers. Nobody wanted to risk becoming their next target. Marcus tried once more to get up, but Jake pushed him down again, harder this time. "Didn't you hear us?" Jake snapped. "Sit still and shut up. We're doing you a favor by showing everyone how lame you really are." Brad flipped through the pages of the sketchpad again, stopping at one of Marcus's favorite drawings, a detailed picture of an oak tree with sunlight streaming through its branches. With a sneer, he tore the page out and crumpled it into a ball. "There, now it's improved," he said, tossing the wadded-up paper onto the ground. "Maybe now you'll focus on something useful instead of wasting your life drawing dumb pictures." Marcus stared at the ruined drawing, his chest tightening. That particular sketch had taken him hours to perfect. Each leaf, each shadow, had been carefully crafted with patience and care. Seeing it destroyed so casually felt like a punch to the gut. He clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him, but he knew better than to fight back. These guys were bigger, stronger, and meaner. Fighting would only make things worse. As the gang continued to laugh and mock him, Marcus lowered his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He didn't know what else to do. Every attempt to defend himself or retrieve his belongings had been met with more cruelty. It seemed like no one was going to help him. He was alone. But then, just as Brad leaned down to snatch another pencil from the ground, a deep voice cut through the chaos. "What's going on here?" Everyone froze. The sound of that voice was unexpected, calm, yet commanding, carrying a weight that demanded attention. Slowly, the gang turned to see where it had come from. Standing a few feet away was Derek Stone, a man whose presence was impossible to ignore. He wasn't just tall, he was built like a wall, with broad shoulders and muscles that spoke of years of hard work. His dark skin glistened slightly in the sun, and his piercing brown eyes locked onto the scene before him. Despite his intimidating size, there was a kindness in his expression, a quiet strength that made him seem approachable rather than threatening. For a moment, no one spoke. Even Brad, usually so quick with insults and threats, hesitated. He straightened, up, clutching the sketch pad tightly in his hands as if using it as a shield. Finally, he managed to stammer, Nothing. Just messing around. None of your business." Derek took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "Messing around?" he repeated, his tone calm but firm. "That doesn't look like messing around to me, looks like bullying to me, and I don't think anyone deserves to be treated like that." Chris shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Brad for guidance. Ryan muttered something under his breath, though it was too quiet for anyone to hear. Jake kicked at the dirt with the toe of his shoe, suddenly finding the ground very interesting. For the first time since they'd arrived, the gang looked uncertain, their bravado crumbling under Derek's steady gaze. Brad swallowed hard, trying to regain control of the situation. "I said it's none of your business, man. Back off." Derek didn't flinch. Instead, he took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "When someone's being bullied, it is my business," he said evenly, "and it should be everyone's business, so why don't you hand over that sketch pad and leave this young man alone?" There was a long pause as Brad stared at Derek, searching for some sign of weakness, but Derek's expression never wavered. He stood tall and confident, radiating authority without raising his voice or making a single aggressive move. It was clear he wasn't someone to be trifled with. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Brad reluctantly handed over the sketch pad. "Fine," he muttered, glaring at Marcus. "Take your stupid drawings. Let's go, guys." Without another word, the gang turned and walked away, their earlier swagger replaced by awkward shuffling. They muttered among themselves, casting nervous glances over their shoulders as if expecting Derek to follow them. But he didn't. He simply watched them retreat until they disappeared around a bend in the path. Once they were gone, Derek knelt beside Marcus, placing the sketch pad gently on his lap. "Are you okay, son?" he asked softly, his voice filled with genuine concern. Marcus nodded, though tears still streamed down his face. He wiped at them with the back of his hand, embarrassed, but grateful. "Yeah," he stammered. "Thank you. I thought no one would help me." Derek offered him a reassuring smile. "There are always people willing to stand up for what's right," he said. "You just have to believe in yourself and know when to ask for help." He helped Marcus gather his scattered pencils, handing each one to him carefully. When they were done, Derek picked up the crumpled drawing that Brad had torn from the pad. He smoothed it out as best he could, examining the intricate details. "This is really good," he said, holding it up for Marcus to see. "Don't let those guys make you doubt your talent. Art takes courage, and you've got plenty of it." Marcus looked at the drawing, then at Derek, and finally managed a small, hesitant smile. For the first time since the gang had shown up, he felt a flicker of hope. Derek stayed with Marcus for a while longer, making sure the boy was truly okay. He could tell that Marcus was still shaken, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to organize his pencils and put them back into their case. Derek didn't rush him. Instead, he sat quietly nearby, offering a calm and reassuring presence. The park around them had returned to its usual rhythm. Children laughed, birds chirped, and joggers passed by without giving them a second glance. But for Marcus, the world still felt fragile, like it might shatter if he let his guard down even for a moment. "You know," Derek said after a pause, "when I was your age, I got picked on a lot too." His voice was soft, almost conversational, but there was a weight behind his words. Kids can be cruel sometimes. They say things or do things because they're trying to feel better about themselves. It's not fair and it's not right, but it happens. Marcus looked up at him, surprised. He hadn't expected Derek to share something so personal. "Really?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Derek nodded. "Yeah, I wasn't the biggest guy back then. In fact, I was pretty scrawny. Kids used to tease me all the time, called me names, pushed me around, stuff like that. It made me feel small, like I didn't matter. But you know what helped me get through it?" Marcus shook his head, curious now. "Finding something I loved doing," Derek replied. "For me, it was fixing cars. I'd spend hours in my uncle's garage, learning how engines worked, taking things apart, putting them back together. It gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. And over time, I realized those bullies didn't define who I was. What mattered most was how I saw myself and what I chose to do with my life. He pointed to Marcus's sketchpad. You've got something special here. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Art is powerful. It tells stories, shares emotions, connects people. That's a gift, not something to be ashamed of. Marcus listened intently, his earlier embarrassment fading just a little. For the first time, he began to see his drawings in a different light. Maybe they weren't just silly doodles or a waste of time. Maybe they meant something important. Thanks, Marcus said softly, clutching his sketchpad tightly against his chest. I guess I never thought about it like that before. Derek smiled warmly. It's easy to forget when people are being mean. But trust me, what you're doing matters. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, they're wrong. Two of them sat in silence for a few more minutes, the tension slowly melting away. Marcus glanced around the park, noticing how peaceful it seemed again. The laughter of children playing tag carried on the breeze, and the sunlight filtering through the trees cast dappled shadows on the ground. It was hard to believe that just moments ago, the same place had felt like a battleground. Eventually, Derek stood up, brushing bits of grass off his jeans. Well, I should probably get going, he said. But if you ever need someone to talk to, or if those guys bother you again, you know where to find me. I come to this park a lot. Marcus nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He wanted to say something to express how grateful he was, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply said, "Okay, thanks again." "No problem," Derek replied with a wink. "Take care of yourself, all right?" With that, he turned and walked away, his broad frame disappearing among the trees. Marcus watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him: relief, gratitude, pride, and maybe even a spark of hope. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. Later that evening, Marcus sat on his bed at home, staring at his sketchpad. The pages were a little worse for wear after the incident in the park, but they were still intact. He flipped through them slowly, pausing at each drawing. Some were rough sketches of random objects: a lamppost, a bicycle, a dog sleeping in the sun. Others were more detailed, like the oak tree Brad had torn out. Even though the crumpled page had been smoothed out, it wasn't perfect. There were creases and folds that couldn't be erased. But somehow that made it even more meaningful. It reminded him of what he'd been through, and how far he'd come since then. As he reached the last page of the sketchpad, Marcus hesitated. Then, grabbing a pencil, he began to draw. This time, he didn't focus on trees or flowers or landscapes. Instead, he sketched a figure, a tall, muscular man standing confidently under an oak tree. The details came easily, almost instinctively: broad shoulders, kind eyes, a reassuring smile. When he finished, Marcus wrote 2 words underneath the drawing: The Rock. He smiled to himself as he closed the sketchpad. Tomorrow would be a new day, and he knew it wouldn't always be easy. There would still be bullies, still be moments of doubt and fear. But for now, he felt stronger. And he had Derek, the Rock, to thank for that. The next morning, word of what had happened in the park began to spread. A woman named Linda, who had been sitting on a bench nearby with her daughter, mentioned the incident to a neighbor. "That poor boy," she said, shaking her head. "Those thugs were awful. But then this man stepped in. He was incredible. Tall, strong, and so brave. He didn't yell or fight. He just stood there and told them to stop. It was inspiring." Her neighbor nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds like Derek Stone. He's always helping people around here. Did you hear about the time he fixed Mrs. Harper's car for free? Or when he organized that fundraiser for the community center?" Linda's eyes widened. "No, I didn't. He sounds like quite the hero." Across town, other conversations popped up too. Parents praised Derek's actions, using him as an example for their own children. "See," one father said to his son, "that's how real men act. They stand up for others, even when it's hard." Meanwhile, Brad and his gang found themselves avoiding eye contact whenever they passed certain parts of the park. Rumors about the confrontation had reached their ears, and they weren't eager to face any backlash. Some of them started questioning whether picking on others was really worth it. Jake, in particular, seemed quieter than usual, his usual bravado replaced by a thoughtful frown. As for Marcus, he returned to the park the following weekend. This time he brought extra pencils and a fresh sheet of paper. Sitting beneath the same oak tree, he began to sketch once more. And though he kept one eye on the basketball court just in case, he felt safer knowing that somewhere out there, the Rock was watching over him. The following weeks passed quietly for Marcus. He continued to visit Greenfield Park, always choosing the same spot under the oak tree. Each time he arrived, he carried his sketch pad and pencils, along with a newfound sense of confidence. The memory of Derek's words stayed with him, echoing in his mind whenever doubt crept in. "Art is powerful," Derek had said. "It tells stories." Those simple sentences became a mantra for Marcus, reminding him why he loved drawing so much. At first, Marcus was cautious. Every time he heard footsteps approaching or laughter coming from the basketball court, he tensed up, half expecting Brad and his gang to return, but they never did. Whether it was fear of Derek or guilt over their actions, the group seemed to have vanished from the park altogether. Their absence gave Marcus room to breathe, to relax, and most importantly, to focus on his art. One Saturday morning, as Marcus worked on a new sketch, he noticed someone sitting on a nearby bench. It was Derek. The man waved when he saw Marcus, looking his way, offering a warm smile. Marcus hesitated for a moment before gathering his things and walking over. "Hey there," Derek greeted him. "Back at your favorite spot, huh?" Marcus nodded, clutching his sketch pad tightly. "Yeah, it's peaceful here." Derek chuckled. "Peaceful is good, especially after everything that happened." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus blurted out, "I wanted to say thank you again for helping me that day." Derek shrugged, brushing off the gratitude. "No need to thank me. I just did what anyone should have done." "But not everyone would," Marcus replied softly. "Most people look away. You didn't." Derek's expression softened. "You're right. Not everyone steps in. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't expect kindness from others. People are capable of more than they think. Sometimes all it takes is one person to remind them of that." Marcus looked down at his sketch pad, tracing the edge of it with his thumb. Do you think I could be like that someday? Someone who stands up for others?" Derek leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Of course you can. Courage isn't about being big or strong. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. And you've already shown courage by sticking with your art even when those guys tried to make you feel bad about it." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. No one had ever called him courageous before. To hear Derek say it made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as weak as he'd always thought. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus began to change. He started paying closer attention to the world around him, noticing things he'd overlooked before. One afternoon, while sketching a family playing frisbee near the pond, he saw a younger boy crying alone on a bench. The boy looked no older than 10, his face streaked with tears. Curious, Marcus packed up his things and walked over. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked gently, crouching beside the bench. The boy sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "I lost my toy car," he mumbled. "My dad bought it for me and now it's gone." Marcus glanced around the area, spotting a glint of metal beneath a nearby bush. Without hesitation, he retrieved the small car and handed it to the boy. "Is this it?" The boy's face lit up instantly. "Yes, thank you." He hugged the car tightly, his sadness melting away. "No problem," Marcus said with a small smile. As he turned to leave, he realized something. Helping the boy had felt good. Really good. For the first time, he understood what Derek meant about standing up for others. Word of Marcus's kindness spread quickly among the younger kids in the park. They began seeking him out, asking if he'd draw pictures for them or help find lost toys. At first, Marcus was shy about the attention, unsure how to handle it. But as the days went by, he grew more comfortable. Slowly but surely, he started to see himself differently, not as a victim but as someone who could make a difference. Meanwhile, Derek kept an eye on Marcus from afar, proud of the progress he'd made. Whenever their paths crossed, Derek offered encouragement, sharing stories about his own experiences growing up. "Life isn't always easy," he told Marcus one day, "but every challenge teaches you something. Even the tough moments shape who you become." Marcus nodded, absorbing the advice. "I guess I'm learning that." "You're doing more than learning," Derek said with a grin. "You're living it." Across town, Brad and his gang were struggling to adjust. After the incident in the park, they found themselves ostracized by many of their peers. Parents warned their children to stay away from them, and teachers kept a closer watch on their behavior at school. For the first time, they realized the consequences of their actions. It wasn't just about getting caught. It was about losing respect. Chris was the first to crack. During lunch one day, he admitted to Jake, "Maybe we went too far with that kid. What if someone tells the principal?" Jake shrugged, though his usual bravado was missing. "We'll deal with it if it happens," Ryan chimed in, frowning. "I don't know, man. That guy, the big dude, he scared me, like really scared me. I don't want to mess with anyone like that again." Brad remained silent, staring at his tray of food. Deep down, he knew his friends were right. Picking on Marcus hadn't been fun. It had been cruel. And for what? To feel powerful? To prove they mattered? None of it seemed worth it anymore. That evening, Brad lay awake in bed, replaying the events in his mind. He thought about Marcus sitting quietly under the tree, about the sketches he'd mocked and torn apart. For the first time, he wondered what it must feel like to pour your heart into something only to have it destroyed. Guilt gnawed at him, keeping him restless long into the night. A few days later, Brad decided to take a walk through the park. It wasn't something he normally did. He avoided places where he might run into trouble, but something compelled him to go. As he strolled along the path, he spotted Marcus under the oak tree, surrounded by a group of laughing children. They clapped excitedly as Marcus showed them a drawing he'd just finished, a cartoonish dog wearing sunglasses. For a moment, Brad stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. He expected Marcus to look angry or bitter, but instead, the boy seemed happy. Relaxed, confident. It was a side of him Brad had never seen before. Before he could second-guess himself, Brad approached cautiously. Hey," he said awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. Marcus looked up, startled. "Oh, hey." An uncomfortable silence hung between them. Finally, Brad cleared his throat. "Look, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened. We were jerks, and I shouldn't have messed with your stuff." Marcus blinked, surprised by the apology. "Oh, thanks." "I mean it," Brad insisted. "We were wrong, and, well, your drawings are actually pretty cool." Marcus smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "Thanks," he repeated. I guess we're good then." Brad nodded, relief washing over him. "Yeah, cool." As he walked away, Marcus watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it felt lighter somehow, like letting go of a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. By the end of the month, Greenfield Park had transformed. The once tense atmosphere gave way to laughter and joy, thanks, in part to Marcus and Derek. Kids played freely, unafraid of bullies lurking in the shadows. Parents chatted openly, praising the positive changes they'd witnessed. Even Brad and his gang had started acting differently, opting for pickup games of basketball instead of causing trouble. Through it all, Marcus continued to draw, capturing moments of happiness and hope. Each sketch was a reminder of how far he'd come and how much farther he could go. And whenever he needed guidance, he knew exactly where to turn. To the Rock, the man who had taught him the true meaning of courage. As summer rolled on, Marcus began to feel like a different person. The quiet, shy boy who once avoided eye contact and kept to himself had started to come out of his shell. He still loved spending time under the oak tree, sketching the world around him, but now he did it with a sense of purpose. His drawings weren't just for himself anymore, they were for others too. One sunny afternoon, a group of kids gathered around Marcus as he worked on a new piece. This time, he was drawing the fountain in the center of the park, its water sparkling in the sunlight. The children watched in awe as his pencil moved across the page, bringing the scene to life. "Can you draw me next?" one little girl asked, tugging at his sleeve. Marcus smiled. "Sure. What do you want me to draw you doing?" "On a unicorn," she exclaimed, giggling. "With rainbows everywhere." The other kids laughed, chiming in with their own ideas. "Draw me flying a spaceship," said a boy with freckles. "No, draw me as a superhero," added another. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. All right, I'll try my best." By the end of the day, his sketchpad was filled with whimsical drawings: unicorns, spaceships, superheroes, and even a dragon breathing fire over a castle. The kids cheered when he showed them the finished pieces, their faces lighting up with excitement. For Marcus, it was a reminder of how much joy art could bring, not just to him, but to everyone around him. Derek noticed the change in Marcus almost immediately. Whenever they crossed paths in the park, Derek could see the confidence growing in the boy's posture, the way he held his head higher and spoke more clearly. It wasn't just about standing up to bullies anymore. It was about finding his place in the world and using his talents to make it better. One Saturday, Derek approached Marcus while he was sketching. "You've been busy," Derek remarked. Nodding toward the group of kids clustered around him, Marcus grinned. "Yeah, they keep asking me to draw stuff for them. I don't mind, though. It's fun." "It's more than fun," Derek replied. "You're making a difference. Those kids look up to you now." Marcus looked surprised. "Really? I never thought about it like that." "Well, you should," Derek said firmly. "People notice kindness, they remember it, and before you know it, you've inspired someone else to be kind too." Marcus nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. He hadn't realized how much of an impact he was having, not just on the kids, but on the entire park. Parents often thanked him for entertaining their children, and strangers sometimes stopped to admire his work. Even the park staff had taken notice, inviting him to display some of his sketches in the community center during an upcoming event. The community center's annual summer fair was a big deal in Greenfield. Every year, locals came together to celebrate with food stalls, games, and live music. This year, however, there was something new: an art exhibit featuring works from residents of all ages. When Marcus received the invitation to participate, he was both thrilled and nervous. "I don't know if my drawings are good enough," he admitted to Derek one evening as they sat on a bench near the pond. Derek raised an eyebrow. "Good enough? Marcus, your drawings are amazing. You capture feelings in a way most artists can only dream of. Trust me, you belong there." Encouraged by Derek's words, Marcus decided to take part. He spent hours carefully selecting his best pieces, framing them neatly, and adding small notes explaining what inspired each drawing. There was the oak tree where everything had changed, the fountain surrounded by laughing children, and even a portrait of Derek standing tall under the sun, the man who had taught him the meaning of courage. On the day of the fair, Marcus arrived, early to set up his display. His hands trembled as he arranged the frames on the table, adjusting them until they looked just right. As visitors began to trickle in, he stood nervously beside his booth, unsure of how people would react. To his surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Families stopped to admire his work, complimenting the detail and emotion in each piece. Some even asked if they could buy prints or commission custom drawings. By the end of the day, Marcus's heart was full, not because of the praise, but because he'd shared a part of himself with others and seen how much it meant to them. Meanwhile, Brad and his gang continued to struggle with their new reality. After apologizing to Marcus, Brad had tried to distance himself from the group, sensing that their old ways no longer fit. But breaking away wasn't easy. Chris, Ryan, and Jake still clung to their habits, mocking anyone weaker than them and stirring up trouble wherever they went. One afternoon, Brad found himself sitting alone on a swing, staring at the ground. He felt lost, unsure of who he was, without the gang. Was he still the same person who had bullied Marcus, or could he become someone better? Just then, Derek appeared, walking along the path with his usual calm demeanor. Spotting Brad, he slowed down and stopped beside the swings. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Brad shrugged. "It's a free park." Derek sat on the swing next to him, rocking gently back and forth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Derek broke the silence. "How have you been?" Brad sighed, dragging his feet through the dirt. "I don't know. Different, I guess. Everything feels off." "That's not always a bad thing," Derek said. "Sometimes feeling off means you're growing, changing, becoming someone new." Brad glanced at him, skeptical. "And what if I don't know who that is yet?" "Then you figure it out," Derek replied simply. "One step at a time. Start by asking yourself what kind of person you want to be. Not what others expect you to be, but what you want. That's where real change begins." Brad mulled over the advice, letting it swirl around in his mind. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe it was time to stop following the crowd and start thinking for himself. Back at the fair, Marcus spotted Derek weaving through the crowd. When their eyes met, Derek gave him a thumbs up, his face breaking into a proud grin. Marcus beamed, feeling a surge of gratitude. Without Derek, none of this would have been possible. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Marcus packed up his display. His heart was lighter than it had ever been, filled with hope for the future. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't face them alone. Not with friends like Derek, and not with the strength he'd discovered within himself. Greenfield Park had changed, and so had Marcus. From a quiet boy hiding under an oak tree to a young artist inspiring others, he had found his voice. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed the summer fair brought a quiet sense of renewal to Greenfield Park. Marcus had become a familiar face, not just to the kids who adored his drawings, but to many of the adults as well. Parents often stopped by his usual spot under the oak tree to thank him for cheering up their children or simply to chat about his art. Some even suggested he start selling prints of his work, an idea that made Marcus blush with embarrassment. He wasn't sure he was ready for something like that yet, but the thought planted a seed in his mind, a possibility for the future. Derek continued to mentor Marcus, though their conversations had shifted from talks about courage to discussions about goals and dreams. "You've got talent," Derek told him one afternoon as they sat together on a bench. "But talent is only part of the equation. What do you want to do with it? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Marcus tilted his head, thinking carefully, before answering. "I'd like to keep drawing, of course. Maybe I could teach other kids how to draw too, show them it's okay to be creative." Derek smiled, clearly pleased with the answer. "That's a great goal, and you know what? You're already doing that. Look at all the kids who come to you now. They see your passion, and it inspires them." Marcus nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. For so long he doubted himself, believing his love for art was silly or unimportant. Now, he realized it was exactly what made him special. It connected him to others in ways he'd never imagined. Brad, meanwhile, was slowly finding his footing. Breaking away from his old gang hadn't been easy. There were days when Chris, Ryan, and Jake tried to pull him back into their antics, but Brad stayed firm. He spent more time alone, reflecting on Derek's words. Who do you want to be? At first, the question felt overwhelming. How could he change after years of acting tough and cruel? But little by little, he began to experiment with small acts of kindness. One day, while walking through the park, Brad noticed a younger boy struggling to carry a heavy bag of sports equipment. Without thinking twice, he stepped forward. "Need a hand?" he asked, lifting the bag effortlessly. The boy looked up surprised. "Thanks," he mumbled, smiling shyly. "No problem," Brad replied, ruffling the boy's hair before heading off. It was such a simple gesture, but it left Brad feeling lighter, as though he'd taken another step toward becoming the person he wanted to be. Over time, these moments added up. Brad started volunteering at the community center, helping set up tables for events or cleaning up afterward. People noticed the change in him, and while some remained wary, others welcomed his efforts with open arms. Even Derek gave him an approving nod one afternoon, which meant more to Brad than he cared to admit. As autumn approached, the leaves in Greenfield Park began to turn shades of gold and crimson, carpeting the ground in vibrant colors. Marcus found endless inspiration in the changing scenery, filling page after page of his sketchpad with scenes of falling leaves and crisp blue skies. One Saturday morning, as he worked on a particularly detailed drawing of the park's gazebo framed by fiery red maples, Derek appeared beside him. "Looks like you're getting ready for winter," Derek joked, pointing to the scarf Marcus had wrapped around his neck. Marcus laughed. "Yeah, it's starting to get chilly, but I don't mind. The colors are beautiful this time of year." "They sure are," Derek agreed. Then, after a pause, he added, "Speaking of beauty, I heard something interesting yesterday." "What's that?" Marcus asked, curious. "The school district is looking for volunteers to lead after-school programs. Art classes, sports teams, music lessons, you name it. I thought maybe you'd be interested." Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Lead an art class? Why not?" Derek said with a shrug. "You've already got a fan club of kids who think you're the best artist in town. Why not share your skills with more of them?" The idea took root almost instantly. Leading an art class sounded daunting but also exciting. If he could help even one child discover the joy of drawing, wouldn't that be worth it? "I'll think about it," Marcus promised, grinning. Meanwhile, Brad's transformation earned him a second chance, at least in the eyes of some. When the local high school announced tryouts for a peer mentoring program, Brad decided to give it a shot. To his surprise, he made the cut. His role involved working with younger students, helping them adjust to the challenges of school life. At first, he felt out of place, unsure of what to say or do. But as he listened to the struggles of the kids he mentored, he realized they weren't so different from how he used to be. Lost, searching for belonging, trying to figure out who they were. Helping them find answers gave Brad a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he felt like he mattered, not because he was feared or intimidating, but because he was making a difference. By the time winter arrived, Greenfield Park had transformed once again. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling the sounds of footsteps and laughter. Marcus bundled up in layers, determined not to let the cold keep him away from his favorite spot. Underneath the snow-covered branches of the oak tree, he sketched cozy scenes of families building snowmen and sledding down hills. One frosty afternoon, Derek joined him, holding 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing one to Marcus. "Thanks," Marcus replied, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "It's perfect." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. Finally, Derek spoke. "You know, Marcus, I'm proud of you. You've grown so much since we first met." Marcus smiled, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "I couldn't have done it without you. You showed me what it means to stand up for myself and for others." Derek shook his head. "I just pointed you in the right direction. You did the rest." The truth was, both of them had played a part in shaping the park's new atmosphere. Derek had stood up against bullies, showing everyone that kindness and strength could coexist. Marcus had turned his pain into art, inspiring countless others to embrace their creativity. And Brad, despite his rocky past, had proven that people can change if given the chance. As the year came to a close, Greenfield Park buzzed with plans for a New Year's celebration. Lights twinkled in the trees, and festive decorations adorned every corner. Marcus was invited to create a mural for the event, a project that thrilled him beyond measure. With Derek's help, he designed a massive piece depicting the park throughout the seasons: spring blossoms, summer sunshine, autumn leaves, and winter snow. On the night of the celebration, the entire community gathered to admire the mural. Children pointed excited themselves in its colorful images, while parents snapped photos and praised Marcus's talent. Standing back, watching the crowd marvel at his work, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was his gift to the world, a reminder of hope, resilience, and the beauty of connection. Nearby, Brad stood quietly, observing the scene with a small smile. He didn't join the festivities, but he didn't feel excluded either. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not because he fit in, but because he was finally being true to himself. As fireworks lit up the sky, marking the start of a new year, Marcus glanced over at Derek, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but Marcus knew he was ready to face it. Together, they, and everyone else in Greenfield Park, had proven that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. And sometimes all it took was one act of courage to spark a chain reaction of change.